Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this session. It's the social pitch with Paul. It's going to be a really great session. I've known Paul for a long time now, and I know he's got huge amounts of insight to share with you. So really, I'm excited to bring him to you today. If you wouldn't mind for us, just a little admin task before we start. If we could make sure all your Zoom names are correct, so we know who turned up today, that would be amazing. We can tick you off our list as an attendee. So if you are got a pseudonym there, or you've got your business name or something, it'd be great if you could change that to your first and last name, if you wouldn't mind. That would be fantastic. I've also put all your microphones on mute just to cut out any background noise, and a quick reminder for Paul, that means your microphone's also on mute now. So make sure you unmute yourself when you take the stage. But yeah, so there will be a Q&A at the end. So take notes and thoughts as you go, and we can have a really open Q&A at the end. Ask away. The more interactive it is, the better for everyone. So do think of questions as you go, take notes of them, and then we'll come back to them at the end. But without further ado, quick introduction to myself and Robot Mascot before I introduce us to our speaker today. So for those of you that don't know, maybe you're new to us, maybe you've just discovered us because of this event. I'm James Church. I'm the author of a best-selling book called Investable Entrepreneur, but I'm also the co-founder of a company called Robot Mascot, and it's Robot Mascot that's bringing you this event today. We are an investment readiness agency. We basically specialize in creating investment materials that convince investors. We work with startups and SMEs raising their first few rounds of funding, a few 100,000 to a few million, most typically those sort of pre-seed, seed, and Series A funding. Supported more than 3,000 founders to date, worked with founders from all over the world, from Europe, the UK, Middle East, Asia, Africa, Australia, literally all over the world. And when they apply our strategy, which I talk about in my book, they're 40 times more likely to secure funding, secured more than 220 million to date. And because of all of that, we've won loads of awards for our approach: a Global Disruptor Company of the Year awards, National Business Advisors awards, and many more besides. And all of that means we are recognised as the UK's leading pitch agency. We're trusted by top tier VCs like Jamjar and Zuccara. We're trusted by leading crowdfunding platforms in Crowdcube and Republic, as well as global accelerators, capital raising partners, and the like. We're to work with their startups, their scale ups, to raise the capital they need to make an impact on the world. So what we really want to see at Robot Mascot, the reason we put on events like this, the reason we bring you experts like Paul, is because we want to see great ideas and innovation flourish. And we really do get so frustrated at seeing these businesses fail to have the impact that they deserve, fail to have that growth that they're hoping for, because they can't communicate properly with investors and secure the funding they need to sort of launch and scale their business. So that's what we're here to solve. If you do feel like you need some help in solving that, feel free to come and join me in one of my fundraising strategy sessions, where I talk about the process we use to deliver those sorts of results I talked about for clients. It's about 90 minutes. We go through a deep dive into different fundraising strategies that you can use to raise capital. And I'll share a link in the chat very shortly for you to book onto the next one of those if you're interested. So please do join me there if you haven't already been on one. But without further ado, look, I want to introduce you now to Paul, who's going to take you through the session today, and hopefully talk about how you can leverage your profile, your founder brand, to be able to leverage that to support you in raising capital. So it's not just about how brilliant your business idea is; it's about how credible you appear as an entrepreneur, as a founder. And Paul's all about making sure you can leverage that credibility. So look, Paul, over to you.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. Nice intro. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. So yeah, my name's Paul Fernandez, and I'm the co-owner of an agency called The Growth Guys, based in the UK. We're a multi-award-winning agency. We've worked with some high-profile brands, including FTSE 100 companies, S&P 500 companies, and most notably, recently we worked with the Team Great Britain team as part of their pre-Olympic campaign, um, which was very fun to work on, very intense, but very fun to work on, and working with individual athletes to help raise their profile as well pre-game. Um, And yeah, what I'm here obviously to talk to you about today is how to raise your profile before you raise capital. So I'm just going to quickly just share my screen here. Yes, there we go. So just a few slides to go through on this one. So yeah, how to raise your profile before you raise capital. I mean, there are probably some preconceptions when you talk about profile, and quite honestly, we're talking about online really these days. This is where we have a lot of our touch points with people. You might read a book like James's Investable Entrepreneur. That might be a touch point, but you're probably more than likely going to be having touch points with people. And when we're looking at investors, investors are going to be looking you up. And if you think about investors as like maybe like in potential employers, you know, if you've ever employed people, you've more than likely done a little online search of that particular person to see what they're about, see what they stand for, what have they been up to before? Do they match up to what they're saying they are? Um, but I think what's really important to note nowadays is that the stage has changed. We're talking about every interaction. I want to kind of maybe focus in on this idea of performance and how do we authentically show up. And I think there's a lot of misconception around the word performance and or being authentic and those kinds of that kind of terminology. For me, performance is in everything that we do, whether it be online or offline. Every interaction that we have online, whether we look at a sales call, a pitch, a LinkedIn post, something as menial as a tweet or a LinkedIn post is all a performance. And when we think about performance, you naturally want to go to thinking about acting, or you naturally want to be thinking about pretending to do something. And performance couldn't be further from that. Performance is about adaptation. Performance is about adapting with intention. So if you think about yourself, you're not the same with your family as you are with your business colleagues. You're not the same with a friend as you are a potential prospect, or if you think about that, we have to adapt ourselves in order to meet the objective that we're looking to achieve. And the game of this, if we look at it as a game, because it is a game, the whole act of business is a game, and we're trying to constantly improve and iterate and move forward. But the game has shifted because of the advent of AI and the mass adoption of AI tools, and the marketplace is incredibly noisy. Visibility is the new price of entry now when it comes to this stuff. Visibility is everything. If people do not, if you're not visible, you might as well be invisible, if that makes sense. And visibility equals access, access to you. People need to have access to you online in order to understand how great you are, to be perfectly honest. You've got great ideas, and a great business, but if we're being completely honest with ourselves, like nowadays in 2025 and beyond, being great is just no longer good enough. And I use the analogy of, if we've ever been in like a business meeting, or a sales meeting, or any kind of meeting, or any kind of group environment where you've potentially had a great idea, but you've not been quite confident enough to raise your hand or to express that idea. But then someone next to you who has an inferior idea, or an idea you think is worse than yours, they've got the confidence to be visible and to put their hand up and express their idea, and then and they run with it, and you're there feeling a little bit looked over, potentially undervalued, and it's all because you didn't make yourself visible. You didn't have the confidence to put your hand up and raise that. And that's kind of like what we're talking about here with visibility, is you need to be able to give people access to you. And I don't mean unfiltered access. It's not bearing all and talking about what you had for tea last night, or talking about, your children's bad habits or anything like that. But we're talking about access to what you want them to see. So about your business, about your idea, about the bits of your personality that you want them to see. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to being to visibility and having access. Because being great is no longer good enough in this day and age. You've got to be seen. You've got to be seen walking the walk, talking the talk, and being consistent with that thought process. And there's a little stat there as well, which is 82% of people, and this is from a source called brandfog.com, which I found, and it's 82% trust leaders when they're more visible online. So, and we're talking about investors and we're talking about raising your profile here. If you think that investors are not looking you up, you're very much mistaken. They're looking you up, they're seeing if you're credible, and they're gonna be more trusting of you if you're online and you're visible. So then let's think about the alternative. If you're not visible, if people do not have access to you, what is the cost of being invisible? Because founders quite often obsess over, and James will back me up here and vindicate this point. As much as we prepare assets like decks and pitching materials and things like that, we as founders naturally gravitate to being more obsessing over those things because it's everything that we do to avoid being visible, to avoid going out there and just making some noise and making things happen. It's a natural thing to want to do, to just obsess over those pitch decks. But we cannot be neglecting presence. We need to be focused as founders and people who want to raise capital and people who want to make moves with our business. We need to be prioritizing presence over obsessing over things like pitch decks and founder decks and pitching collaterals and things like that. That's why businesses like Robot Mascot exist, is to help you with that stuff so that you can then focus on your presence online and you can be more visible and give people more access to you. If you were to Google search yourself, I guess you'd probably, you might have done that from time to time. It's a good activity to do. But if you Google yourself, then how much of yourself is available online? Like, what are investors seeing? What is the first impression? But when we look at invisibility, if you're not there at all, then what is the actual real cost of that? And I've broken it down into three here. It's You don't get that intro. We all need that intro to a highly impactful investor. We need that intro. We're pitching cold. If they're not seeing us online, they're not having those digital touch points, they're not seeing our presence online, then those pitches are naturally cold. There and you the likelihood is they're going to get skipped, they're going to get looked over, they're going to get deleted. They might even fall into spam because they don't know you, don't trust you. They haven't mapped their inbox to allow your email to come through. And it also means, and I think this is probably one of the most important costs of invisibility here, it makes trust building slow. When people can see you online, when people can see what you're talking about and see how consistent you are, um, it builds that trust factor a lot quicker, and they start to build almost a little bit of a parasocial relationship with you. So for those of you who don't know what parasocial relationship is, a parasocial relationship is essentially what people used to have with celebrities. They would see them on movies and on TV and in interviews and in magazines and feel like they know them. But then when that celebrity would meet that person, they wouldn't know who they are. But that person meeting the celebrity knew everything about them, their dog's name, all kinds of things. But we're comparing it there to celebrity culture, which is completely different. But we need people to create, almost like generate that relationship with us before we've spoken properly or been able to meet more formally. we want to be able to create that relationship quicker, and that happens through being present and creating visibility online. So I guess a quick task, and you don't have to do this right now, but I think it might be good for maybe after this is finished, is uh, Google yourself right now. Google yourself right now or later, and just ask yourself, would an investor be impressed with what they see? Is there a full sort of LinkedIn profile full of thoughts and ideas and insights and wins, losses? Are we sharing our journey? Are we proposing our ideas in an articulate way? Because looking at that perception, the perception is your first impression. They need to be able to create a first impression from what they see. So Googling yourself is a really important task to do, I think, and it's worth doing maybe every couple of months. Just Google yourself, see where you rank. If you've got quite a common name, then it's quite important to to try and differentiate yourself from those others that share a name with you. If you've got a unique name, that is an advantage. I'm not going to lie, because there's going to be fewer of you. But essentially, that things like content online, that it does rank on Google. And I know obviously we're kind of moving. We're in this really weird time where ChatGPT and other large language models are starting to rank content, and we're calling it generative engine optimization, so GEO rather than SEO. And generative engine optimization is like the new SEO. It's the new way of being cited by large language models, and that's a whole different discussion and tactic that potentially you could look at. But it all starts with one thing. It all starts with just putting yourself out there a little bit more, putting yourself out there, citing ideas and putting thoughts into the world, wherever that may be, whatever your chosen platform is, whether that be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, blog writing, YouTube videos, whatever. It's You've got to start somewhere, and you've got to be building up that presence, because ultimately that is what is most important, is um, being able to create that first impression and create that perception with with the investor, and the perception that you want them to have. Uh, ob Obviously, we can't control what people think, but we can certainly give it a good go by putting things in front of them that we want them to see. And you are in complete control of that. So then when we think about the kinds of pitches that we're putting forward, because this is obviously called, this is the social pitch. And, you know, I kind of come back to the beginning of what we're saying is that because people back people, investors back entrepreneurs. Yes, they back great products as well, but ultimately they're backing the founders. They're backing the people with the ideas, the people that are going to move this forward, the people that are going to rally around, the people that are going to enroll people to work with them, and enroll and encapsulate and envelop people into their ideas. And a lot of founders, they, again, just like the pitch decks and the founder decks and sales collateral and pitch collateral, etc. A lot of founders, they over index on product. A little tweak here, a little tweak there, without actually putting anything live into the world. And that as much as that is great, as much as that is, you're working on your product, and that's ultimately that is important. Of course it is, because it needs to work, and it needs to be good enough to be sticky, and it needs to retain users, and it needs to retain customers and generate revenue. Of those things are massively important. Of course they are. But ultimately we're trying to get people to that product. So your personal pitch is what people need to be seeing. People need to be seeing more of you, and can they believe in you? Because I ultimately believe, and this is my opinion, and it's probably not shared by everybody, but people buy from people. That's the first iteration of that. And then there's people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And that is really important. But I think we've gone one further than that now. I think it's people buy from people they know, like, and trust and believe in. And I think belief is incredibly important. Belief is, can this person take me from A to B? Can this person solve my problem? Can this person develop a product that's good enough for me to make a return on? Can this person sell well enough to convince people in the audience that this is something that they should have? All these different types of questions come from a personal pitch. And investors want to know that you are credible. They want to know that you are resilient. And more importantly, they want to know if you're fundable. Can I put money into this person and know that I'm gonna, or at least have the best possible chance of getting a return? And we look at this idea of like the performer versus performance, um, because they're essentially betting on the person behind the pitch. The person you can the pit if you look at the pitch as a performance, which it is, you rehearse, you mull over the words, you choose your words carefully, just much like you would do a script. You stage it, you back it up with good design and all those kinds of things. A pitch is definitely a performance, and you are the performer of that pitch. So when we look at the performer versus the performance, they're betting on you. They're betting on the performer behind the pitch. Who's the person that's created this pitch? And when we look at product pitches, product are features, traction, market, total addressable market, uh, projected churn, annual revenue, recurring revenue, all those kinds of metrics, they go into your product pitch. That's undoubted. But your personal pitch, it's much more intangible. It's confidence, it's conviction, and it's your story. And I just want to sort of make a note around confidence at the moment because that's kind of where we're moving on to next. But confidence is a bundled term. Confidence isn't a single trait. It's definitely a skill. Confidence is not something you're born with. It's something that you work on as an individual. And there's two different types of confidence in my eyes. There's situational confidence and there's evidential confidence. And when we look at situational confidence, I would probably reterm and redefine as courage and visualization, because situational confidence is the confidence we need before we do something. And usually it's before we do something new. So if you ever think about something new that you had to do at one time in your life, and I use an example of playing rugby. Playing rugby, going onto the pitch for the very first time, I had no idea what I was going to do, what idea, but I had to visualize. I had to think about potentially scoring that try. I had to think about potentially what happens if I make a mistake. All those kinds of thoughts, that inner monologue that you go through, and running it through your head, running it through and developing that situational confidence. Because essentially, and the other part of that is courage, just the ability to say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to step out anyway. That's the kind of confidence you need before doing something. Then on the other end of that, we've got evidential confidence. And this is 99% of the time what people actually need and mean by confidence. And it's I've done this before and I know what I'm doing again. And you get better every time, and it becomes about reps and repetition and iteration and improvement. So we've got situational confidence and we've got evidential confidence. And a lot of people, when they're talking about creating content or putting themselves out there more online, they need more situational confidence. They need more courage to do that, and they need to visualize it a little bit more. What do I want? What do I want that investor to think about me? What happens if they perceive that wrong? What am I going to say? Or I'm going to combat this with a little bit of sort of something that's counterintuitive to that as well. Is that's the visualization is not to be confused with overthinking. We don't want to be overthinking everything that we put online, but we do want to be thinking about how people are perceiving us. There are people out there that put content out there and don't care what other people think, and that's great and that's fine. But there are people out there that do care. And when we think about the people that do care, it's because they do care about their perception, their image, their reputation, and how investable they might be when we're talking in this context. So moving forward on confidence, I think personally confidence is the new currency. I think we're moving into a world that is noisy. People need conviction, and confidence is the new currency. If we think about visibility being the new barrier to entry, confidence is your currency and your ticket through to visibility. We need to have more confidence. And like I said before, nobody's born confident. It's something that we work on. Um, but what the real truth is, and it's some hard facts here, like, some hard reality, is that it's the loudest voice that often wins. If we think about what we see online, or if we've been through experiences where, like I said, like that sales meeting, or that the reluctance to put your hand up and express an idea, but there are people out there that are spreading, they're putting their ideas out there and spreading them far and wide because they're louder. It is the loudest voice that often wins. And in order to be louder, you need to be more visible. And to be more visible, you need more confidence. And usually we're talking about situational confidence. And confidence, I was taught from a very young age that there's a very fine line between confidence and arrogance. And we're definitely not talking about arrogance here. We're talking about confidence. And the difference between the two is confidence, it's the energy of belief. So when I'm saying before, people buy from people they know, like, and trust and believe in, confidence is the energy of belief. Because ultimately, when we're trying to raise investment, investors want conviction more than caution. Just repeat that, because it's quite important. Investors, they want conviction more than they want caution. It's so easy to tell them everything that could go wrong. They want conviction, and they would rather you be uh, resolute in your opinion, in your idea, in your belief of your product and business, and they want to know that they can back you. If you're there being quite, well, it probably would do this, or it might do that, and this could go wrong if we did this, you've lost them. They want to go, this is what we're going to do, this is why we're going to do it, and this is what we will do if it doesn't pan out. They need conviction. They need to know that they can trust you and believe in you to take it forward and be able to pivot. It takes reps. It takes reps, not talent, to be confident. Nobody's born that way. When we think about children, young children, um, they would appear confident, but actually they're just completely oblivious to the world. Whereas we're different to children because we have a knowledge of the world around us and our perception of the world around us. And sometimes that can knock our confidence, and that can beat confidence out of us. But nobody really is born confident. I would say that we're born naive. We're born where we don't know any better. But as we grow older, we need to develop confidence. We need to work on confidence as if it's a stack of skills that are incredibly important to moving people and getting people to believe in us. And when we talk about reps, we're talking about showing up. We're talking about failing, refining. Those are the type of reps that we're putting in. So if you think about every cringe moment, or every LinkedIn post, or awkward pitch, you've got to be thinking about that as the training ground. That's the gym. That's where we're working out. We're thinking of it as the rehearsal space. Every cringe LinkedIn. You've probably posted something online a couple of years ago, and you look back on it and go, really? Is that me, really? But that's okay, because that was your training ground. You've learned from that. You've moved on, as long as obviously it's nothing nefarious. But we're moving into a place where your thoughts and beliefs and your values don't change. Your beliefs do. And when we're talking about cringe, we're usually talking about a change in beliefs. regardless of how big or small. But that cringe LinkedIn post, that awkward pitch that we did, or that sales call that went incredibly wrong, that's your training ground. That's where we need to learn and fail and get back up. And I could quote a really cheesy Rocky movie quote, but I'm not. And for those of you who are Rocky fans, you probably know which one I'm talking about. Um, Quite a lot of the time as well, and this is the situational confidence thing again. Quite a lot of people are waiting until we're ready. I need to be ready before I can do things, and waiting until you're ready is a trap. It's an absolute trap because you're never ready. You're never ready. And again, this is like a boxing quote. I can't remember who said. I think it's Mike Tyson. It's like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's kind of like feeling ready. You think you know what's going to happen, and you really don't. We do need to prepare, of course we do. We need to rehearse, we need to stage, we need to think about what we're doing, but it's only action that builds confidence. We need to take action. It's that courage again. We need to have the courage to take action to build confidence. Get the courage to take action. Keep repeating it. Put the reps in, and that will eventually build confidence over time. And definitely waiting until you feel ready is the ultimate trap. And then we're talking about, coming back to this idea of performance again. We think about perfection, um, and we think about trying to make sure if you are a kind of perfectionist, then you do want things to be good, and that's usually only because you care. But we kind of need to get out of this perfectionist mindset, because perfection now belongs to the machines. With AI, you know, argue with me, fight with me, but AI is 99% pretty much perfect. Depending on what you put into it, obviously. But AI can do 99% of the job now. There's not much it can't do, and there's not much it won't be able to do in the future. Let's leave perfection to the machines. Because at the end of the day, adaptability is for humans. We are human, and we fail. We're piss poor. We're nuanced. We have faults, and that's what makes us human. Is that we learn. We have a thirst for knowledge. We learn through action. We are sociable beings. We interact and communicate with one another, and that's not a machine. We need to be adaptable. We need to be human. And I think, ironically, the increase in technology is going to highlight the importance of being human. And the only way we can do that is to become more visible. And again, it's this idea of visibility and access. We need to think about being more iterative rather than flawless. So again, it's coming back to this idea of putting in the reps, building confidence, having the courage to do that, and then being able to be iterative and not flawless. You want to be treating content as rehearsal, like the training ground. We want to treat it as a rehearsal. We need to test, we need to learn, and then we need to adjust. And they're the three fundamentals of any marketing campaign, to be honest. And we need to be thinking about our content, as I mean, content is part of marketing, of course it is, but treating our personal content as just that, as a testing, learning, and adjusting process. Because I'd rather see people be imperfect but visible rather than perfect and invisible. I think just repeating that to myself, imperfection and visibility way over perfection and being invisible. Thinking about everything that we do, if we're not visible, how do is that? I guess we come back to the old sort of Chinese proverb. I don't know if it's a Chinese proverb, but a proverb that if the wood falls in the tree, if the tree falls in the woods, but there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? And that's very much like you in the online world. If you're not putting ideas out there, how can anybody hear you? How can anybody see you? How can anybody explore your brilliance, your idea, your next multi-million pound idea, something that's going to change the world, something that's going to change people's lives, the big problem that you're solving in the world? How is anybody ever going to know that? How is anybody ever going to see that and experience that if you are invisible? And I do honestly think that visibility and adaptability and the, just being human online is the last advantage that we have. Like I said, AI is going to take 99% of what we're able to do, but the 1% is our advantage. Speed isn't our edge anymore. Being perfect is not our edge anymore. It's about being human, being nuanced. So moving into content and putting more content out there and being more visible, I think of it as a three-act story structure. So quite often we need to put stories out there because that stories are the ultimate connector. We live through stories. If we go all the way back to early humans, we connect through stories. Um, and again, this is the difference between humans and AI, and the world that we're living in now. Large language models and AI can mimic words. They're just predictors. They're predictive machines that are guessing the next word. Um, and AI can definitely do that. It can mimic words, but it cannot mimic lived experience. It cannot mimic what we experience as humans and as individuals. And the story is our unfair human advantage, is our advantage over AI. We have experiences, and our experiences differ, and you'll probably repeat an experience uh, differently the next time you tell it because you might embellish a certain side of the story, or you might highlight, or you might focus in on one particular part of the story that you didn't before, and that's again what it is to be human. Um, and stories, we use stories between humans to create belief. We need to resonate. We need to resonate to create belief. And if we think about how the human brain usually works for most people, is that it's usually emotion first before logic. So we need to resonate emotionally with people before our logic kicks in. We're thinking, does that appeal to me? Is that something that's sort of like gets me right here, and then logic kicks in? Okay, that would be a good investment, or that would be a good idea to go with. But we always kick off with emotion, and stories are a great way of evoking emotion and resonating with others. So when we look at the three-act story structure, it's very, very simple. We start with origin. What is it about this that where does it go back to? How does that relate to us? And we'll go into this a little bit more when we look at the story pitch framework a little later on. But we look at the origin of that story, and then we need a bit of conflict. If you think about any kind of great movie you've ever watched, there's always the origin of the movie, which at the beginning, everything's nice, lovely, fluffy, everything's moving around like it should. And then we have a conflict, a moment of conflict in the middle of the movie, or three-quarters of the way through the movie. But it's always more than likely, 99% of the time, it's resolved. We have a resolution, and we have this cyclical cycle of telling a story. And we need the origin, we need to anchor, and then we need some conflict to mess it up a little bit and create a little bit of tension. And then we resolve it, and we leave people feeling on a resolved note. So I think about my own story, and I'll put my story out to you. So I use my own story. I use the from tour van to marketing plan story. So the origin of it is, in my 20s, I was in a touring rock band, and we toured all over the UK, Europe, and some bits of America, and it was chaos. It was uncertainty. I didn't know where I was getting paid. I didn't know if I was going to make any money. Um, and the conflict set in. I started having challenges. I started wanting to settle down. I wanted to have some certainty in my life. I wanted, I was looking at these as false starts, and I'm coming to my mid to late 20s, and I'm not married. I don't have kids, and I don't have a house, and all this kind of thing. Um, and the resolution to my story is that I found clarity in marketing. Marketing was something I really enjoyed. It was something that was quite relevant to my 20s. It was quite relevant to my days in a band. And I could apply a lot of those skills into helping others with their marketing and in business in general. And the point is that I felt like it was the mess the mess that I'd kind of made in my 20s, it made the message, so that the mess is what investors will connect with, because I'm showing that I'm human, I'm showing that I'm vulnerable, I'm showing that I've lived a life, I've lived a normal life, and that it's not everything has been perfect. Um, and I use that story. Obviously, I use that story a little bit more sort of more well prepared than I just spouted it to you guys. But that's kind of like the rough story is that, for a lot of my 20s, I was in a touring rock band with no certainty. And now I'm using those skills that I've developed over 10 plus years to apply to my professional career, and that's what I use. When we think about visibility, visibility is not vanity. We're not looking for vanity. We're not looking for engagement metrics. We're not looking for all of that. We're looking for credibility. And 81% of people actually need repeated exposure before that trust starts to form. And we don't want to be creating obscurity. Obscurity is expensive. And if you sat there and you're brilliant but broke, it's because you're unseen. If you're not able to create that visibility, you're not going to be able to put the brilliance out there. So the visibility is definitely a prerequisite for access to capital. We need to be creating more visibility, and a lot of you are probably already doing this, but we need to be creating more visibility and less obscurity to our brilliance. And I think founders, they fear visibility because it does feel vulnerable. I think we feel like we're putting our raw selves out there, and we don't want people to see all the airs and graces, like I said before. And if we think about it as if we think about visibility and performance together, it actually does create a bit of an armor. It does actually give you power. Viewing it as a performance gives you that power to curate and still be authentic. And again, authenticity is something probably for another time, but authenticity is often quite misused a lot of the time and is misrepresented actually as a term. So if we're thinking of performance as being the armor that we have and the power, we need rehearsal. We need rehearsal. We need that training ground to create that confidence, because we need to be deliberate. And if you think about any great performance you've ever watched and seen, it's always been deliberate. It's not about being fake, it's about being deliberate. Everything is planned, everything is rehearsed, everything is, we do need nuance, we do need a little messiness. That's fine. That's all part of being human. And you never plan for the mess. We're always trying to be deliberate. And you've got to be able to frame yourself. Visibility is safe. If we create visibility, it's not scary. It's creating that safe space. And you have the ultimate control to be able to frame yourself. So just because I'm aware of time, I'll just now move on to the social pitch framework. So the social pitch framework is a four-step cyclical process, and we start with anchor. So anchor being clarity of identity and values. Moving on to then articulate, we need to be able to shape those thoughts we have into compelling stories. Amplification, we need to show up where it matters the most. So if you think about where your investors or where your clients are, that's where we need to show up the most. And it doesn't matter, again, it's not vanity. It's about showing up and being in front of those people that we need to be in front of. And then attract. investors feel like they know you before the meeting. So just moving through those four again. So the anchor is who you are, what you believe, and why you're building what you're building. Articulation is tell the story with conviction and not confusion. We don't want obscurity. Investors don't want obscurity. It's expensive to you. It's a waste of time being obscure. Amplification. Focus on the channels where investors hang out. Where are they? Where do they watch? Where do they read? Think LinkedIn, podcasts, YouTube, those kinds of places. Be there for where they hang out, and then attract. Shift, shift the investor mindset. We want to warm them, warm before before getting them into the room. So just a quick recap of everything we've kind of spoken about today, and I realize it's a lot of information, and I realize a lot of it might be sort of quite four-dimensional, and not quite seen and heard much before, but ultimately the stage has changed. I personally believe visibility now is the price of entry for anything that you do. More importantly, when you're trying to raise cash, trying to raise capital for your ventures. Um, Confidence, adaptability, and your story is your investor edge. That's what will get an investor to believe in you. And like I say, people buy from people they know, like, and trust, but we need that belief as well. And I think the social pitch framework, it warms investors up before you present them with your deck,
Mm.
uh, but with your pitch. Um, and just obviously, just quickly before I finish, the social pitch framework comes from an AI tool that we've developed and is still in the very early stages of. We have a small founder cohort on the tool, and if you would like to be part of that founder cohort as well, we have a really special founder offer, which is our Kickstarter plan, which is £19 a month. Can be found at SocialPitch.ai. Essentially, it's everything we've talked about. It's about turning your voice into visibility. So social pitch is about going on there, interviewing yourself, get those thoughts, get the brilliance out there, and let the AI do the rest. It will be able to create content for you at scale, and you can essentially create a month's worth of content in around 20 minutes using the tool. So if you're really interested in that, go to socialpitch.ai, sign up for the Kickstarter plan, and you'll be able to join our Facebook community as well, where we've already got some users in there sharing their videos. And I am in there quite regularly, where I will be, asking people how they're getting on with video and how they're getting on with turning their voice into visibility. And I'm there to help, essentially to help you move forward. And I guess more importantly, let's connect on LinkedIn as well and continue the conversation. If any of you have any thoughts, any questions, I mean, we'll do a bit of Q&A now as well, very briefly. But I'm there to continue the conversation with you guys as well. So. This has been really fun. I was quite excited about delivering this today with James, and um, I hope you've all found a lot of value in this as well. I do genuinely think that the world is changing massively and the stage is changing. So, and we need to change with it. So, thank you very much, and yeah, here to answer some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. Really insightful stuff. I think hopefully everyone's learned so much from you today. So thank you. Has anyone got any questions they want to share? Drop them in the chat, or even better, just unmute yourself and shout out if you've got a burning question on how to build your profile. If we got anything from anyone, there we go. Aid, you've got your hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, so thank you so much, James and Paul. My name is Tia, and I'm the founder of Enabled. So Enabled is an Indonesia-based community support platform, and we focus on supporting bereaved parents and parents of special needs children. Currently, I'm wrapping up my MBA as well at University of Oxford. And the reason I think this session has been really insightful because that's something that I actually struggle with, balancing between trying to increase my visibility, but at the same time trying to increase the excellence in my delivery to the basically to the community. Um, I feel like, especially when we're trying to basically support rare disease patients, rare disease children, special needs children, the reason so far I feel like hesitant to increase my visibility because one, it seems that most people cannot relate to the cause. And second, if people do relate, it's more because of sob stories, which I really hate because I don't want people to listen to my page just because, they feel pity on the children that I work with. So my question to you, Paul, is basically how should I like you just give me like a very practical insight on how to really balance between increasing my visibility as well as increasing my excellence. Because right now, for me, my effort in increasing the visibility is just focusing on increasing the excellence in my delivery, and it will eventually generate like word of mouth. People like start to recommend us, so on and so forth, and that's basically how we grow. But I also understand that with that method, actually, it costs us like a slow pace of growth. So yeah, how can I balance between balancing increasing visibility and increasing excellence? So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Really great question because you're dealing with a very sensitive subject, and it's one of those where you could probably very easily get that wrong. So you're dealing with something very sensitive. What I would advise is having the courage to maybe speak to a few people that you already deal with on a sort of private DM basis, someone that you can have a private and confidential chat with, and just say, look, this is what I want to say. This is how I want to get the message out there. Is this going to cause distress to people? Is this going to cause offense? Is this going to cause like this is what I want to say? But I think moreover than anything, more so than anything, I think it's just having a bit more courage to talk about it in real terms. This shouldn't be a taboo subject. You should be able to express your excellence the way you want to. Obviously, there's nuance to this, and we have to be very careful about the words that we use and the manner in which we present. But your excellence is only as good as the people that are willing to listen. So word of mouth is great, but it's very slow burning. Um, and actually, again, I want to choose my words carefully, but these are very, very poignant and very, very relevant topics that you're talking about right now. And actually, it's your obligation, actually, I would say, is to talk about them because what it does is if you get yourself out there more and have the courage and be a little less filtered, um, you will learn very, very quickly what to say and what not to say. And you've got, like you say, you've got your excellence there, but essentially people are probably looking for people like you to be talking about this.
Yeah, I would say
That it,
I'd add to that a couple of things that spring to mind from my own journey of doing this. I think when we start out, I think we're always a bit scared to put ourselves out there and say what we really think because we're worried that you will create some kind of Twitter storm. Now I know you're in a sensitive subject, so that's even more prevalent. But what I've learned is that you can more or less, I guess this is kind of Trumpism, it's you can more or less say whatever you want, and but if you say it with enough confidence, people will accept it. So as long as you stand by what you're saying and you believe in what you're saying, it will be accepted by the majority. And very few, if you say it with enough confidence, very few people will react to that negatively in the way that you think they might. Secondly, remember, none of this is about you and your fame. This is about shining a spotlight on something meaningful. And the best way to get around this idea of building a profile, we're not trying to be influencers here. We're trying to build a profile. And the best way to do that is to shine a spotlight on something impactful and meaningful that you care about. You've obviously got that in bucket loads. For me, it was about shining a spotlight on the trouble founders have communicating with investors. So that was a thing I solved and was passionate about trying to solve. And it's about how not about me, it's about how do we support founders to do that. And then the final thing that I've learned is sometimes saying the opposite of what people expect. People might call it come up with some controversial statement. I think controversy sort of paints the wrong picture because you worry that that triggers those thoughts of a Twitter storm or that kind of thing. But something the opposite of what people expect. So one of the key lines that I discovered when I was thinking about founders and how do I communicate, how do I cut through with my message was the line that I use quite regularly in my book. Great ideas don't raise investment, great communication does. Because I think a majority of founders think my idea is amazing, it's so good, people are bound to give me money. And then you sit there going, well, why is no one investing in my brilliant idea? And it's because you're not communicating the business model correctly. So it's the opposite of what your audience take for granted. So the general thought is we've got a brilliant idea and brilliant ideas get investment. And I'm saying no, that's not the case. And then the people go, what? Huh? Let me listen to what this guy has to say because that's different to what everyone else is saying. So I think if you can combine some of those things and just have confidence and just try it, just put it out there, talk differently. Don't be afraid to do it in the way that you want. I think you'll probably get more positive from it than negative, if I'm honest. So I think it just is confidence at the end of the day and accepting you can say whatever you like. And if you say it with confidence, people will accept it. Some people might disagree with it, but that's okay too. Um, as long as
Mm.
it's truthful and from the heart. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
thank you so much, Paul and James. I tried, so several times I tried. Most of the audience turns out like crying, like hearing, knowing that I'm helping these rare disease patients. But hopefully, as I increase my reps, as I train more, hopefully I can find wordings that would, really fit my goal. So, but thank you so much, Paul and James.
No
You're
worries.
welcome. Thank you. Best of
So I've
luck.
got a question here from Brian. I think I know what you're going to recommend, Paul, but which platform would you suggest for a founder to leverage to increase their visibility through video and voice?
Are we talking about a platform to put content onto or a platform to use to generate
Let's
content
go.
or generate
Let's
visibility?
until we get clarification. Let's get. I assumed platform to create, um,
Okay.
but
I would always recommend
maybe
Social
actually
Pitch.
increase social pitch, but maybe it is to increase visibility, so maybe it is about reach.
Yeah, so I would always go back to ultimately it's about where who you're trying to talk to, where do they hang out the most? And if that is LinkedIn, then spend some time on LinkedIn. If that's Twitter, spend some time on Twitter. It's you've kind of got to move away from comfortability, what is comfortable to you. And again, it's like what you said, James, it's not about you, it's about them. And about communicating that in a way that they would prefer that to be communicated as well. So if that is through LinkedIn in a more potentially professional way, and
Yeah,
then do that. If they go to YouTube to solve their problems through video, then go
yeah.
to YouTube
Slightly.
and get
If you're trying
comfortable
to
with video.
increase visibility with investors, then you're probably using LinkedIn and maybe X,
Hmm.
Twitter. If you're building a brand and that brand is and I'm going to use a single parent community as an example because that's one of our clients, a single parent community, then they've got their traction by having a voice on Instagram.
Mhm.
If you're trying to sell products to gamers, you're probably going to be on TikTok or
Mm.
YouTube and doing kind of
Or Twitch.
games or Twitch. It's really there isn't a one rule. If you're going to increase visibility, it's about understanding your audience or segmenting your audience and going, well, actually, we have
And
multiple stakeholders in the business, and who are where do they hang out? Where do I need to kind of go deep on my time and effort? And the one thing I would say again is once you've identified that, and I don't know what Paul thinks, but again, my experience was to go deep and hard on one vertical rather than sort of spread myself too thin. So I have content go out across all the sort of major platforms, but LinkedIn is the one that I spend the most time interacting, engaging, and because that's the right one for my audience. So I think you're better off starting out by going deep and hard on one platform that's the one place they hang out, the core place they hang out, than trying to spread yourself thin across multiple platforms.
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I would add as well, it's do as much as you can be consistent with. So if you can quite comfortably do 3 posts on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram a week, and you know that you can do that consistently for many numbers of weeks, then do that. But it's always easier, like James says. I do believe that it's easier to start with one core channel, get good, do more, get good, and then move elsewhere as well, while remaining consistent on that core channel as well.
In answering that, we've also answered Bassa's question around
Thank you very much.
what should they do around uh, their platforms that have been sort of pretty untouched since uni. So yeah, delve deep into one. And the thing with if we're talking social media here, then the key thing is engagement. So I've noticed the when I engage more in other people's content and comment on that, certainly in LinkedIn, my engagement goes up. It triggers the algorithm to say you're active, so we're going to boost your content to have more eyeballs on it. So I get higher engagement when I'm more active. And the weeks that I'm busy and I'm not so active, I start to see my engagement drop on my own content. So it's a social media, not a broadcast media. And I think we fall into the habit of broadcasting. But the more social you can be, the more you can comment, engage on other people's posts, the better your own content performs, in my experience. So yeah, when you're considering channel and time allocation, consider that as well, I would say. Cool. Is there a demo of Social Pitch, Paul, or do you have to book a call with the team or sign up before you get to see it?
Like I say, we're still very early stages with this. We're working on some video demos to go through, but ultimately it's there to go through. There's a little you can go on the site and have a look at what it does. But like I say, it's very early stages. We're still figuring some stuff out. But if we've priced it what we believe to be low enough for people to go in and have a go, and that this is, like I say, we're at founder cohort stage, so it's low enough to take have a test drive with it, work it out, play around, break it, feedback to us as well. But yeah, we're still working on some of that collateral to go onto the site, including some demos and things. But
I
yeah,
appreciate that we're way over time, but there is two hands raised. So, Paul, are you okay for
yeah,
another
sure.
minute? So
Of course, yeah, yeah.
do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Paul. I just wanted to ask a question in terms of, from your experience, what would you say visibility, how would you balance visibility with the workload that you also have to do as a founder of your company? To what extent would
Yeah.
you go so far to be visible for you to have success?
Yeah, so I guess it's a really good question, actually, because obviously as founders we're really busy. We have busy weeks and busy days. Again, I'll come back to this consistency piece. So as much as you can afford in order to be consistent, that's first and foremost. Also, it's kind of one of the reasons we built Social Pitch, so that you can essentially do those kinds of things in less than 20 minutes. But ultimately, I personally believe that you should be carving out time in your week. It is important to remain visible because not only are you trying to attract investors, but clients and potential customers. Everything kind of comes down from sales, so we need that visibility in order to do that. So I would be treating it like a sales tool, like a BDM tool, like an attraction tool, an attraction piece. So I guess, yeah, like I said, consistency, whatever you can be consistent with. And here's a stat for you as well. So you know less than 1% of people post on LinkedIn. Less than 1% actually post on LinkedIn, just as one example channel. So 99% of them are lurkers and don't do anything on LinkedIn. And I think that was kind of proved. Was it Bassa? Sorry, I think I missed your name there. But a LinkedIn channel that's been untouched since uni. You know, there's a lot of those kinds of channels. So when you go on LinkedIn and you see people posting that they're the 1%, you only have to post once a week to be in the top 1% of creators on LinkedIn. You know, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But like James said as well, James made a really good point. These social media platforms, their algorithms are rigged to uh encourage engagement. So the more engaged you are with the platform, the more it will reward you with visibility. So as anybody who says, the algorithm isn't the problem, it absolutely is definitely part of the problem. So, but ultimately, just getting going and doing what you can be consistent with on a daily or weekly or monthly basis is what I would say is
It's
important.
habit forming, Beatrice. So I had the same thing when I started out doing this sort of thing 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it's habit forming. So something like Social Pitch will allow you to carve out, maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's an hour, but if you set aside an hour a month to create two really good pieces of content for a week, so 8 pieces of great content that you can post over the next twice in a week over the next 4 weeks. Create that in an hour using tools like Social Pitch to do that. And then my habit is every morning while the kettle's boiling and I'm waiting for the first cup of tea of the day, I'm on LinkedIn, and I challenge myself to comment on 2 or 3 posts where I feel I can add some value or an insight to what someone said, a VC or a founder or someone. And that's it. Unless I am a bit bored at 2 o'clock in an afternoon and sort of having that sort of afternoon kind of like slump, and then I might jump on and do a couple more. But you do that habit form, and once you do that every morning for 2 weeks, it will just become, you won't even think about it, you'll just be doing it. And it will just become natural. So yeah, it's kind of finding systems and processes to make it impactful but easy. And you shouldn't really need to spend much more than that to start with, to say that this isn't about being an influencer and creating a monetized, millions of followers and having to create huge bits of content every day. This is just some personal insights, some business insights around what you're building and the problems you're solving, and another great way is having systems of like, right, maybe you sort of create a Medium blog post or a LinkedIn Pulse thing, and you go, right, I'm going to create one article a month, and then I'm going to turn that article into 4 social posts. So it's kind of, how can we reuse our content? Maybe you've written a business plan for your business. You've got your pitch deck. Every single one of those slides could be turned into a piece of content. Here's the problem we're solving, the big 3 problems we're solving in this industry. Here's what I believe the solutions are. Here's the opportunity in the market that I'm working in. Here, all of these things could become real thought leadership pieces. You just take bits from your business plans and turn them into thought leadership content. So it's about being smart with what you've got and forming those habits. So hopefully that helps. Aaron, finally you, and then we'll call it a day.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm a founder of Heady, and our app helps people to recover from concussions. So, my question is, how do I balance using LinkedIn as a sales channel for B2B2C, and maybe B2C, but mainly B2B2C, as well as being relevant to investors? So obviously the content might be a bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, you have two ICPs there. You have two people that would potentially your content is relevant for. So it's about segmentation and it's about balance. And I guess to be honest, the balance will come from taking action and repetition and being able to iterate and finding that balance once you get started or continue to do whatever you're doing. So I guess I would probably ask myself to what weight, to what percentage do I need certain bits of content to appeal? So if the investor piece isn't your whole focus, but the B2B2C element is, then I would be anchoring my content and my visibility to being 75% towards those and 25% towards investors. So if you're planning four posts a week, make three about sales or around that sales objective, and one around the investor piece. So I guess that's a very sort of subjective question to you, because I think only you will know that with your business really, and in accordance to your goals. But yeah, it's about segmentation, and you can talk to other specific people with your content, and you don't have to create one piece of content that appeals to both. I mean, you can do that, but you don't have to create one that appeals to these and then one that appeals to the investors. And you can use call outs in your content. So for people who have just suffered concussion, here are 10 tips or 10 steps or whatever it might be. Or hey, venture capitalists looking to invest in apps, I've just done this and this is what it does. Whatever, very bad examples, but that's kind of like how I would think about it. You've got two tracks and you create content down those tracks, and eventually, sometimes those tracks might merge, but more often than not, you're creating the content for those people. If you think about it as an audience of one and creating content with that in mind.
I also think that if we think about what investors are looking for, they're looking for validation, market validation, more than anything. And your expertise as a founder, your ability to galvanize the market, have insights into the market in which you operate, understand your audience inside out, know how to talk to them. So all of that content you're going to create for your audience is going to impress investors. That's what they're looking to see, is you being able to define yourself in this market. So I think there is quite an overlap. I think you've got if it's B2B to C, that's why you're using LinkedIn. It's not a consumer channel. You might use, if you're trying to sort of build a brand to the consumers, then you'd probably be using TikTok and Instagram or something for that. So if LinkedIn is your B2B to C channel, then the B2B audience that are going to sign up to kind of give what you offer to their clients, their audience, they're going to be impressed by similar things to an investor, I think. So if you're going to position yourself as a thought leader on this, I don't know what problems you're solving, but there's these big problems within your industry that you're looking to solve, and you're shining a spotlight on those problems, and that there's this methodology, this approach, this thing that people haven't identified yet that solves this problem, and it just so happens you've created a product around it. That's what you're going to be saying to your B2B audience that are going to sell that onto their consumers. But that's also exactly what investors are wanting to see in terms of you being a thought leader in that space and being able to engage with that audience. And if you're getting loads of comments and engagement from this business audience that want to sell that onto their employees or their customers, however the model works, then they know you're able to deliver traction and sales and growth in an industry, and they're seeing traction happen in real time, right, when they check out your profile. So it's all interconnected. You don't have to say, this is there'll be some stuff like you want to talk about growth. We've just signed up this partner and it's going to open the doors to A, B, and C, or we've just, exciting news. We've just, we're thrilled to be able to announce that we've just we've grown from X to Y to Z. But that's as exciting for the B2B customer as it is the investor to see that, well, I was kind of considering using Aaron's platform, business solution, and I can see that because you're growing, because you're talking to traction to investors, because really you want investors, so you're telling them about your traction, the B2B customers are going, well, this is social proof, and maybe I will sign up after all. So actually, I think it's a lot of the same stuff is going to attract both audiences in most cases. So it's about having having an understanding of what that thing you're shining a spotlight on is, that I mentioned, that what's that big thing that you're trying to achieve. And then it becomes less about a call to action to an investor on a post saying, do you want to invest in my business, or do you want to sign up to my platform? It's bigger than that. You're talking about something much bigger, this huge problem that's around concussion that needs solving, and almost don't mention your product at all. Like, I very rarely in my content talk about our services very, very rarely. It's always, if you're trying to raise investment, you should, here's some tips, here's some advice, here's a big problem as I see it, and here's how it could be solved. It's much bigger than the product or service you're selling. So think about it on those terms, I think, if I were you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you to both of
Good.
you.
All right, look, we've gone way over. This is probably like the most over we've ever gone on on an event, which means it was good because people loved it, stuck around and asked loads of questions. So look, thanks for being with us today. We've got more events coming up every month. We try to bring you some new experts to talk about stuff that'll help you on your journey. So join us for the next one in about a month's time. But yeah, thanks all for being with us. Paul, thank you ever so much for sharing your incredible insights and knowledge with everyone. And yeah, I'm thrilled to see so many people get so much value. So thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you at an event very soon. All the best. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.